to Module 2, Using Google Plus in Virtual Education. We're going to start with the Google Plus basics, as we've done with the other examples of social technologies you've reviewed. Now, before I even get into the basics, I will say one of the advantages to using Google Plus is that it is integrated with all of the other Google tools that are available, many of which are very social or community-driven tools in and of themselves. So things like YouTube, Hangouts, communities, pages, and all sorts of other tools out there are nicely connected into Google Plus. Now, we're not going to get into those other tools and do a deep exploration, but we're going to talk about Google Plus pages as well as Google Plus communities as we work through how we might want to use Google Plus for our classes. Now, Google Plus does have the same age restriction. Actually, Google in general has this age restriction of 13 years or older. This may actually be different in other countries, so please be aware of your age restrictions. And Google takes privacy very seriously. So you can control who sees what very specifically for each Google tool that's then integrated into Google Plus and then for Google Plus itself. So Google Plus, though, is generally public, so its default is to be public. But you can very much so create private communities, private pages, private YouTube channels, private things within Google as well, and invite very select people to those communities, pages, and other social technologies. Definitely play around, go explore all of your settings in Google, because not only do they have extensive privacy settings, they also have extensive notification settings. So you can choose when and how and where you're notified of new activities within any of your pages or communities. Now, the style of Google Plus is really an integrated suite of tools. There's lots of interaction, lots of community focus, but it's about putting things out there in different formats all in one place. So actually, Google Plus is a really nice way to support perhaps your classes if you don't have a learning management system. Let's say you don't have access to online tools that within your school or district or even your class because of cost reasons or just technology reasons. You can put up a pretty nice class website pretty quickly using Google Plus and Google Communities. Now, you can't do some of the testing, but you certainly could do surveys through Google Docs. You could have synchronous meetings through Google Hangouts. You could support the creation of content through Google Docs, and then students could upload them or through video, through YouTube, and they could upload them and share them privately within your class community. So think about this not only as a social tool, but also perhaps as a classroom management tool to a certain degree. It doesn't have testing features and some other things like that, but it does allow you to do some basic management of your class virtually. The pace can be slow or quick depending on what tool you're using. The community may be slow, or the page may even be slower because it's more of a static environment, but it is pulling updates from YouTube, from Hangouts, and from all the other resources that you may be using in very synchronous ways. So it can be slow or fast. You get to determine that pace. Google Plus is great for sites that need to use multiple tools. If you're going to have multiple modes of interaction, you want to use Google Plus so that you can connect all those different modes together and people can go to one place, your students could go to one place to know, okay, I'm going to meet with my group tonight in Hangouts, I'm going to click here. Okay, I need to give an update on my project plan, I'm going to push an update here. Google Plus also does enable integrations with other social technologies, so you can use Google Plus as a central platform, but then maybe you want to use some other social technologies as well in your class. You can have students start from Google Plus and post out from there, or post out from there and have it connect back to Google Plus if you would like to as well. Those kinds of things are in your advanced settings, and they're around what kinds of technologies can be integrated. So look for, in advanced settings, the ability to connect different kinds of resources. This environment, this Google Plus environment, is great for community-based environments because once again, it allows in a very visual sort of web page oriented view, the community to come together and share and communicate and collaborate. It's also got very flexible permissions. Once again, I think Google has really done well in making sure you can choose how and where you want different kinds of people to participate, especially with a number of the different tools available. So I encourage you to explore those permissions, but then also to think about if you've got very specific activities or projects that need very specific permissions. Some students have manage access, other students have read-only access. Google Plus is a good place to be very flexible or play around with those kinds of permissions. And the nice thing about Google Plus and Google in general is there are apps for education that many institutions have adopted. Even outside of apps for education, generally educational institutions, if you're supporting hybrid classes or you're a virtual class but you're out of a regulated classroom, you usually can access Google Plus. It's not generally blocked, which is nice. And it has a really good reputation in education, at least as a supporter of education and a place that thinks about the kinds of things that education might need. So you tend not to have to argue for support among parents, among teachers, among administrators within your schools to try to use Google Plus or any of the Google technologies. Some of the drawbacks, interestingly enough, and there's actually been quite a few jokes in the community about Google Plus, it's not as heavily adopted as things like Facebook and Twitter. Part of that is timing and when it emerged, and part of that may be because it's a more general tool and it does a lot of different things as opposed to create a very specialized environment in things like Pinterest and Facebook. So sometimes that appeals, the very specific environment, to people more than a general environment, because a general environment can be kind of overwhelming and I can do so much, but where do I start? I think Google has done a really nice job designing its Plus pages and its community pages so that it's very easy to know how to get started and contribute. But I think some of that has slowed down adoption of Google Plus, so your students may not even know what Google Plus is or have ever used Google Plus. Now, I do think they probably do know what it is because they probably have YouTube accounts and other tools out there in Google that they may have used, but they probably haven't been exposed to pages or communities as much, and definitely probably have not created their own pages or own communities. The integrated tools do require more specific profile management though, because not only do you have Google Plus management and Google Communities privacy and profile management, but then for each of the individual tools it integrates in, you have its separate sets of profile management. So just making sure, this takes a little more time to make sure that students are really thoroughly thinking through their accounts in the most appropriate ways across all of those devices or all of those technologies. So some sample lesson ideas for how to use Google+. I think through Google Plus pages, portfolios could be done very nicely. And in fact, I'll be linking to some examples of some student portfolios through those pages. But they're really a great place to do it and to get community participation or feedback on those portfolios. You could also encourage students to create communities as projects, maybe activism projects or social projects. You can have them create communities and invite people to participate in the various activities that they're doing to support their communities. It's great for group project management, particularly when you're using communities and Hangouts. So if a group wants to come together, they can create a private group, a private community, where they're sharing their docs, updating stuff, talking about building things, and then they meet in Hangouts casually once a week or once every other week to chat about the status of their project. And it's nice how it's all just tied nice and tightly together. Google Plus could also be a great FAQ site, frequently asked questions site, or place to gather questions and feedback, where the community can respond, your class can respond, or maybe you do it across classes. All grade 3 classrooms at a particular school that are doing virtual activities might come together and participate in a centralized Q&A area. Now, synchronously, Hangouts is great for guest speakers. In fact, we're going to explore Google Hangouts in week 3 of this course, where I'm going to put myself out there in a Hangout on air, and we're going to be able to have you ask questions and discuss things. I'm going to highlight some things that some of you have said in the discussion forums. That would be great for your classes as well, or if you invited a guest speaker in. Hangouts is a fairly popular technology alongside Skype in order to encourage access to people that may not be able to physically see each other and physically interact. And so I think a fair amount of experts or guest speakers that you may want to bring to your classes could make themselves available through Hangouts. So now let's think about how we might want to apply Google Plus to our classes more specifically, or to your individual settings. So for example, my class has been using Google Plus since the beginning of the school year, but I'm starting to see things, participation wane. Part of my problem, I believe, is because I haven't explicitly asked students to do activities in my Google Plus environment. Part of it also is I haven't allowed my students to have more control over that experience. It's been more me sharing out as opposed to asking students to create that experience themselves. So what ways do you think I could use Google Plus, or how could I better my use of Google Plus to foster collaboration among my students and to see more work being shared through that environment? So while you think about that, we're going to go ahead and hop into Google Plus and explore a little bit about how you may want to choose to use Google Plus in your class. So I'm right now looking at my page in Google Plus. This gives me the ability to see, and I'm viewing it as public, so I'm viewing it as you would view the page. This gives me the ability to see what I have posted within the community. As you can see here, I've posted some ideas. You're going to see some videos that have automatically been posted to this page because I've loaded them into YouTube. I've got an article in there, and I can see that there are some people that are within my circles, if I want to have circles or groups or connections that are very specific connections. And I have the ability to see a community that I've associated with this page. Now, I just created this community, just so you know. I just did this recently. I wasn't sure if I should create a community or not associated with this course because we have all sorts of social technologies that we're using and that I set up without explicit assignments attached to them, but that they're places for you to play in, to explore, to try out things. They were not meant, and perhaps that's why we don't see a whole lot of activity in some of them. They weren't meant as an assignment, or I didn't have an explicit activity like I recommend you do in your classes, but instead I just wanted a free-for-all. Go play, see how you might think you might want to use them, have a place to bounce ideas around. So I just recently set up this community for that. So you can actually come and join this community. If you go to that page and you click on the community, you can actually join this community as a method of exploring and figuring out what it feels like to be in this community. You could share it with other people, invite people. Feel free to post and use this as you wish, but this gives you a sample of that community. Now, just like it's been in other technologies, always go to the wheel to determine how you want to manage the community or the page or any of the tools embedded within it. Now you can see here I could pick a photo for my community. My community is public, and I set it as public, so unfortunately I can't now make it private, but I could have set it as private up front. I can also be able to manage members through that wheel. So Google likes to separate editing items from managing members. I can also manage members and even share my community or invite others to join my community. Now, if I go back up to my left-hand navigation, I can take myself back to my home page where I can see recommendations for myself as well as things that are going on across my pages and communities. And then I can also, you can see here, go use other kinds of tools. One of which we're going to use in week 3, which is Hangouts on Air. So that just gives you a little bit of a view into Google+. Definitely consider using Google+. In fact, I'll go back to our Google+ page for pages in supporting activities and even for having students create their own pages, own portfolios, own places where they're managing. Now you're seeing this as myself, where they're managing their work and sharing that with others to get feedback and collaboration.